Okay, we're going to have some time where I'm going to be speaking to you from the Bible. We're going to start by reading from the Bible, and Anna Smith is going to come and just read for us as we focus on just this time where we sort of think and speak about God. Okay, all yours,
Anna. So reading from Mark 8:27 to 33. Jesus and his disciples went on to the villages around Caesarea Philippi. On the way, he asked them, "Who do you people say I am?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others one of the prophets." "But what about you?" he asked. "Who do you say I am?" Peter answered, "You are the Messiah." Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about him. He then began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and after 3 days rise again. He spoke plainly about this, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. When Jesus turned and looked at his disciples, he rebuked Peter. "Get behind me, Satan," he said. "You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns."
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Anna. Yeah, I wonder whether you would do me a favour. Would you mind turning the fan off? I might lose my papers if I had that problem last week. I was sort of wrestling and juggling. No one wants to see that. So if we have the next... Oh, yeah, thank you. You're on it. Thank you. Yeah, our clicker's broken, so Jack is my clicker of the day. In Grace Church, we have talks on lots of subjects. We are currently talking about some of the most important words ever spoken, known as the Sermon on the Mount, brought by Jesus. We cover different books of the Bible at different times. We're also in the middle of doing an overview of every book of the Bible. And so that is interspersed in amongst other things that we talk about. And we've got as far as Ezra and Nehemiah. So we've got a bit of work to do on that. But today, it just seemed right. We were going to go right back to basics, back to the main thing. And that has been evident as Helen's prayed, as Rebecca's led us in worship. We felt, obviously all of us, without consulting with one another, that was where we wanted to be today. And so for those of us who are new to faith, this is an opportunity to hear about the central focus of Christianity. And for those of us who've known God and been Christians for days, months, or even years, and I know we have all of those categories of people in this room today, ultimately, this is an opportunity, just a reminder of what it's all about. And of course, as we know, Christianity is primarily about this one man. And what I want to do is spend a few moments talking and thinking about this man, Jesus Christ. And we've heard, that's why Anna very beautifully read, a little section of one of the biographies of Jesus, written by this man called Mark. And so, thank you, Jack. Jesus was discussing with his followers. I've used some artwork that I quite liked. I just found old art. I apologize if it's not really your taste, but I just liked some of it. So it's pleasing me if no one else. Jesus was discussing with his followers the issue of identity. Who is this man? And Jesus asked them this question. He says, "Who do people say that I am?" And his friends very quickly reply. They say, "Well, people are saying all sorts of things about you, Jesus, that you wouldn't believe. Some people are saying you're John the Baptist come back to life. Other people are saying you're Elijah. Others are saying you're one of the prophets." So everyone had an opinion on Jesus. I don't think much changes. I think people still have an opinion on Jesus, and they're not dissimilar to the examples given by these followers. So, for example, he is a prophet. Do you know what? That's what many other religions say he is. He is a teacher. Many historians and academics cannot deny that Jesus' teaching was pretty profound and had a shape upon the culture of society even today. He's a good example to us all. Now, that is what a lot of people say. "Oh, Jesus, don't know much about him, but he seemed to be a really nice bloke. Decent chap. Good egg, Jesus was." And of course, he was all of these things. But was he more? Then he asks the key question. He says, okay, people say I'm this, people say I'm that, people have all sorts of opinions about me. What about you? Who do you say that I am? And this man called Peter, he speaks up for the rest of them and he says, you are the Messiah. Peter here is saying, look, Jesus, you are actually the one who was promised. God in human form. You are completely unique, Jesus. There's no one like you, Jesus. So much more than a prophet. So much more than a teacher. So much more than just a good guy. Peter is acknowledging, this is quite interesting, Peter's acknowledging what Mark, the writer of this biography, promoted from the very first line of his book. Right at the very beginning of this biography, Mark writes this, the beginning of the good news about Jesus Christ, the Messiah, the Son of God. So right at the beginning, it's confirmed, and Peter is confirming it again here. This man is God on earth. There has never been anyone like Jesus before or since. He is the unique Son of God. And as we think about this, I want us to think about where Jesus was talking about this stuff. The place that Jesus was when he talked about this stuff, right, is a place called Caesarea Philippi. And I think it's the only time that this place is mentioned in the life of Jesus. Possibly the only time Jesus visited this place called Caesarea Philippi. And the first thing to say about this place was it wasn't particularly special. In fact, one of the nicknames of Caesarea Philippi was the gates of hell. Because this place had a lot of bad stuff going on. Crime, immorality, all sorts of bad stuff was happening in Caesarea Philippi. It was looked down upon. It was despised. But the declaration of Jesus' identity was made first in this despised, poor old place. More than that, if we look at the parallel biography of this story, another man writes about this, a man called Matthew, and we find when Matthew writes about this, that Jesus actually declares for the very first time his commitment to build his church in this place. Not a place regarded as important. Not one of the big posh places. Not one of the well-known, renowned places. Not the Jerusalems or the Bethlehems or any of those places. No. Now, I think it's interesting. I don't know whether you will, but I do. I think it's interesting that as we meet in this place, as we meet in the hub, on the Grange, Jesus made his great declaration about who he was in a place which wasn't really regarded as very important. In fact, it was a place that had a bit of a reputation. I think Jesus might be doing that again. I think what he once declared in Caesarea Philippi, he is now declaring on the Grange. More than that. In Matthew's Gospel, we find Jesus responding to Peter's statement of faith about him being God by saying that, the faith of Peter, illustrated by what Peter says, is the thing that Jesus will build his church on. And then, he says, as he builds his church, the gates of hell will not overcome it. He makes this statement in this place called Caesarea Philippi, which was otherwise known as the gates of hell. Isn't there so much richness and depth in the Bible when we just dig down just a little bit? But there's something else about this place. Its name, Caesarea Philippi, right? It was named after one of King Herod's brother, Philip, but it was also named after Caesar, after the Caesar, the ruler of the Roman Empire, the Roman emperor, a man who declared himself to be God. But more than that, this town was also where the Greeks and the pagans worshipped many idols, many gods, including, it was famously known, it was most known for the place where a Greek god, mythological Greek god called Pan lived. Right? So the god of Greek mythology, Pan, was unique among the gods. The reason for that was because he chose to live on earth rather than stay in the heavenly city of Olympus. Right. Let's not miss this. Jesus took his closest friends to a place that was named after Caesar, a man who declared himself God, and a place where the Greek god Pan lived, a god who chose to live on earth. A place famous for a man who said he was God, and for a God who chose to come down to earth. And Jesus, in that place, he says, guys, who do you think I am? It's a little bit like, come on, lads. The venue's the clue here. And as soon as Peter gives his answer, Jesus begins to predict what will happen to him. He'll be betrayed, he'll be denied, everyone will turn against him, that he'll be arrested, that he'll be tortured, that he'll be whipped, that he'll be beaten, and finally that he will be executed on this Roman cross. He'll be crucified. And Peter immediately says, oh, no, that's not going to happen. I'm not having that, Jesus. Now, isn't that interesting? Peter says Jesus is God, right? Clearly makes this statement. And then Jesus says something that Peter doesn't like. And Peter says, no, I'm not having that. Now, isn't that human nature? Isn't that human nature? I loved my parents. They're both sadly dead now. I loved my parents. Often when I was a child, they would give me good advice, wise advice. They would help me. But I remember as a teenager, I was not always prepared to respond quite as positively to their advice. A little bit like Peter with James. I didn't like what they had to say in certain occasions. And I remember one particular example which I will share with you to my shame. It was the 80s, the 1980s. That's when I was a teenager, work it out. It was the time of Miami Vice with their cool white jackets. And I remember borrowing a jacket from my sister. It was very white and very tight because she was, as anyone who knows my sister will know, she was much, much smaller than me. The sleeves were halfway up my arms. And I thought I looked so cool. My parents didn't really agree. In fact, my dad told me I looked like an ice cream salesman. I was, of course, very unhappy with their old-fashioned response and realized at that point in time they clearly knew nothing about fashion. And so I wore this awful, awful jacket. It was so tight and so uncomfortable. It was a hot day and the jacket was really very hot, but not in the way that I'd hoped it would be. I was determined to wear it. The fact that 4 people came up to me and asked me for a cornetto didn't put me off. I am exaggerating there slightly, but I rebelliously wore it because I really didn't like what my parents said. I wore it all day, and I never wore it again. Now, this is a very trivial example, I know, but I think as we reflect on this conversation between Peter and Jesus, we're in danger of doing the same thing with God sometimes. We don't always like what God says, even though He knows best, as my parents clearly did in this situation, and He wants the best for us. I think there's a lesson for us maybe here, every one of us. Peter declared Jesus was God, but he wasn't so keen when God said something he didn't like. And what Jesus was saying was concerning the events that was going to be the best thing that could possibly happen for every one of us. And yet Peter, he just couldn't see it. And so let's just pause with that thought. Just for a moment, acknowledging God. believing in God. But then God says something that we don't like. Maybe through a preacher, maybe through the Bible, maybe prophetically. We just know, oh, no, I don't like that. I didn't want to hear that. How do we respond to that? Now, I suspect that might be an ongoing challenge for each of us. It certainly is for me. But let's ponder and reflect on those times where God speaks something, and we know He said it, and we, oh, I didn't want to hear that. How do we respond at that point in time? Here we find Jesus describing what is going to happen. Jesus on the cross paid the price. I think it's the next one, Jack, thank you. For all the sins of the human race. Everything the human race has done to mess up this sorry planet. But also, He dealt on the cross with our own individual failings as well. See, Jesus' death is the solution to the problem of all that has happened that makes the world what it is today. But more than that, Jesus' death is the solution to the problem of what has happened in your life, either caused by you or caused by others, the stuff that has caused you pain, that you might even be struggling with today. It's the crux of history. It's the most important event of all time. The one thing that gives human beings hope. It is the ultimate rescue mission. And yet Peter says, no way. I'm not allowing that to happen. And I say that because how we view who Jesus is very much tied up with how we understand His death. Because Peter had partially got it. He could see Jesus was unique. He could see that Jesus was God. But His death, why would God have to die? Wasn't it enough that God had come down to live with us? And Jesus said, no, that wasn't enough. His death was necessary for you and I to be saved. Without His death, we would have to pay for our sins ourselves. And so we have to decide, in that temporary moment of weakness, was Peter wrong or right? Was Jesus' death just the death of a good man, ultimately a waste of a life? Ultimately the end of a good man's life? Or was it actually the hinge of history which opened the door to God? This decision is more important than we might think. And Jesus wants to make sure that we don't miss it. And in the last few chapters of the book, everything that Jesus said happens. He's deserted, He's arrested, He's tried, He's tortured, and He's crucified. And then at the very end of the book, just as the football commentator once said, just as you think it's all over, Mark brings a surprising conclusion. The women who are the followers of Jesus, they feature in the last part of the story. They're the last to leave the cross, and they're the first to visit the grave. And as they go to the grave, they are greeted by a young man dressed in white. And he says this, "You are looking for Jesus the Nazarene who was crucified. He has risen." He has risen. Risen from the grave. The one thing that separates Jesus from everyone else in the history of the human race is this one solitary fact. He has risen. The only person ever in history to make a proper comeback. This is the thing that means He is God. The fact that Jesus rose from the dead when He died on the cross means that it was indeed God dying for the human race to save us. His resurrection authenticates His crucifixion. You and I need Him because He was the only one who could rescue us. No one else can. And he's the only one because he's God. He is God because he's risen from the grave. I think I'm into circular reasoning now, but you've got the point. The only way to spend eternity with God is by believing in Jesus, putting our faith in what he has done for us. And if you don't, you won't. And so for us today, are we going to trust him? And we're going to pray in just a moment. It's a relatively short talk today. You'll be glad to know it's hot, isn't it? We need some ice cream. We're going to pray right now. So, right where you are, I'm going to encourage you to pray. So, there are every category of person in the room. Are the kids coming in, by the way? Yeah, thanks. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind just giving Matt a heads up. Is that all right, Paul? Thank you. So there's various people in the room. There might be people in this room, you're not sure of your relationship with God. You're thinking, oh, well, maybe this is the time to make my first step towards God. And this is a good opportunity. My first step, maybe, towards becoming a Christian. Others in the room, you might feel, actually, I know God, but I want to continue to follow him. And so that will be your prayer. Some people in the room, you might feel, I've just drifted. And therefore, I want to recommit my life to him. So all of those categories of people exist in this room. Those who want to make that very first step towards God. Those of us who are saying, I want to continue to commit my life to you, Jesus, day after day. And finally, those people who feel, I've lost my way a bit. I want to recommit my life to him. So if you feel able, where we are right now, let's just close our eyes. Let's put our hands on our hearts, shall we? And in this moment, if this feels like your time, particularly, to begin your journey of faith, in your head, I want you to pray and I want you to say to God in just a moment, I come to you. Or maybe, if you're in a different category, I'm coming back to you. Or maybe, for many of us, I want to continue to walk with you. So one of those prayers may be relevant. It's a very short prayer, but it is an eternally significant prayer. I come to you. I come back to you. I want to walk with you. I want to keep walking with you. As it's quiet, pray it now. Thank you. It's not a prayer that should take us very long. You've prayed that very simple prayer. Maybe it's almost like the first prayer you've prayed, or maybe you prayed it for the first time. It's a sense of, I'm going to come to God. Or maybe it is like, I'm coming back to God. And I want to encourage you to do a couple of things. I want you to tell someone. I want you to tell either the person you came with, or the person you're sat next to. It might be the same person, it probably is. Or a person you trust, might be the same person again. And particularly if you've prayed that prayer as a recommitment or for the very first time, I want to encourage you to follow that up, because that is just the seed, it's just the beginning, a tiny step on your journey towards giving your life to God. It's not the whole job, it's just the beginning. And if you're in that category, you think, Roger and Helen will be available just under this screen at the end of this service. I want to encourage you, come with a friend if you're a bit scared, and they would love to pray with you and pray for you and follow up that opportunity that you've had today. And maybe you're here and you've responded in some way to this incredible news. Can I say it's a pretty important day for you? And we celebrate that. But more than that, all of heaven celebrates that as you start out on this journey of faith. God bless you all. Thank you so much for listening. Amen.